All right. And we are live. You are with the Sunday night evening broadcast with the church safety guys. I am James, and Paul is to my my right, your left, maybe. I don't know. I still haven't figured it out. And how long have we been using this?
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So anyhow, so thanks for joining us. I just wanted to mention a couple of things real quick, and we'll get into the topic for this evening. You can visit our website at churchsafetyguys.com. That's listed below. And for right now, through April 12th, if you go on there and register, you will be put in for a drawing for this book that we have to give away from USCCA, which is Countering the Mass Shooter Threat. It's pretty cool. But as far as registering, a couple of people have asked me, what do you do to that? Or what do you do to do that? If you go to the website and actually just click on register or log in, all you're doing is putting in your email information. And then what we typically do, we're actually getting ready to roll out probably once a quarter a newsletter or one sheet page of just tips and different topics and stuff like that. So I've been working on that and actually getting ready to roll that out. I actually had one for Easter, and now I'm kind of like, okay, I don't know if that's gonna benefit people at the moment or not, because of what's going on. But either way, if you go on there and register, we don't sell your information or put it on eBay or anything like that. But if you're just joining us, feel free to like and share this video so we can get it out, get the content topic out more, and then feel free to go ahead and list where you're from, your church name. That kind of gives us an idea of who's listening and where. So we appreciate you guys hanging with us tonight. Yeah, Dave Johnson just posted, we know Palm Sunday. Yeah, hopefully, right, Dave? Hopefully. Jim Howard mentioned that earlier tonight on his broadcast. He was kind of commenting that we still, it still could happen. I mean, I know in Ohio, with some stuff going on today, it might change a little bit, but who knows? So anyhow, this month's broadcast is actually sponsored by Jim and Wendy Howard. We have partnered with them at Trinity Security Allies, and you can visit their website for some great content. There's some great pamphlets and resources and books that are absolutely free that Jim's made public to folks. And I will go ahead and bring him in.
I've been trying to reposition this book, and I just totally dropped it a minute ago, and I'm sitting here going.
Hey, Jim, thanks for joining us tonight. How are you doing, sir?
Doing well. Down here in Florida, it's a nice day. It's a nice day.
So are they rationing toilet paper and?
No, it's kind of funny on that. My daughter, you heard me earlier. She was at Embry-Riddle, and of course the school is closed down. They're doing all their classes on the web, and so I went over to pick her up, and she had a case of toilet paper. So it's kind of like we were welcoming her home. Yay, you're bringing something with you, So yeah, I don't understand the toilet paper. I mean, of all the things that you could think of that we would have a shortage of, it wouldn't be toilet paper. But anyway,
I've never seen anything with the coronavirus that mentions diarrhea, so I'm really perplexed.
Yeah,
blowing your nose, I don't know. I haven't figured that one out. But
there you go. I can see blowing your nose. I drove an hour and a half over the weekend to a friend of mine who, in his entire area, which is a metropolitan area, he could not find a single roll of toilet paper for sale. And so I made a pass around my area, put a little care package together, and drove up. And we were joking back and forth about, Operation Holy Roller and Flush with Success. And I mean, I joke, but it's a little silly to have to even go do something like that.
Like I said, I'm amazed by it. It was my wife was in the store a week ago, and there was one package of like 12 left, and she picked it up. And as she was walking out the door, one of the guys said, "You better watch out; they'll jump you in the parking lot over this." And I'm like, really?
Well, and it's funny. I've been going to the grocery store a few times, and right now I was mentioning actually to Paul and Mike and Michael, which Mike and Michael are in the background helping us run Facebook and hanging with us too. But I mentioned to them earlier that today I stopped by Sam's Club because I was going to try and get some chicken and some ground beef, and the store wasn't actually busy per se, for a Sunday, but at the same time, there was very little chicken, no meat at all. The paper aisle was just gone. Where they used to have pallets was, open space. Mm-hmm. And I started thinking, in my mind, of course, when I go out, typically, probably 99% of the time I carry, but now when I go out, I'm kind of starting to wonder if people are going to get a little bit more agitated or easily agitated for stuff like that. And that makes me a little bit nervous. I've been trying to kind of hold back a little bit, like from my kids just going to the store by themselves type thing, because that makes me, and not obviously not for them, but just the other odd people out there that all of a sudden decide that they need to stock up on, peanut butter or toilet paper.
Isn't it sad? I mean, Jim, you understand this, like in a lot of military environments, people have battle buddies, and if you're in a foreign country on leave, you don't go anywhere without your battle buddy, or the SEALs have a swim buddy, and you're always paired up in case you get jumped. Isn't it a sad thing to think you're like, hey, James, I'm going to run over to, to Target real quick and get some stuff. Would you want to come be my battle buddy?
Well, I have a friend of mine that he worked for St. Pete Police Department. Now he works for one of the local chains here, one of the very popular chains. And he was telling me that he's had like 5 fights out in the parking lot, over the last week, of just people getting to arguments over, parking spots, or, hey, you've got all these, toilet paper nobody else does. And so, it's weird. It's weird. Goodness, it's just a virus, I mean, I don't know what we would do if there was a shortage of something,
Actual shortage.
Yeah.
I made a comment the other day to a friend of mine, and I said, I almost made this meme and put it on Facebook, but it would have been too true. I almost made a meme and took Dr. Phil, and he's got that, we did the test and it proved you're a liar, little meme. And I almost made this thing and said, all of you people that have been talking about how you could survive the apocalypse, no. It's like if you can't handle this,
right?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't honestly know. It's funny to me because when you look at how things trend, and obviously a lot of people, I've been in logistics for a long time, and a lot of people don't understand or realize that there's a trickle effect, right, from suppliers and warehouses and stuff like that. And so, I've talked to a couple of people that are like, well, when the governor releases the state of emergency in 2 weeks, then, everything will be back to normal. And I'm like, no, because of the supply and demand.
Right.
I'm like, I used to teach economics for one of the local Christian colleges. Let's talk about this for a second.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, it's just weird times. I've never seen anything like this. I mean, gun sales are up. Ammunition is, being sold like crazy. I mean, and we're talking about something that the regular flu has killed more people than this has in our country. I mean, I know that other countries have been hit hard, and I don't want to take anything away from this because it is something serious. Sure. But practicing good hygiene, is the biggest deterrent. Really, it's not like we have to put on masks and wear masks or protective equipment and things like that. Just good old, cough in your sleeve, wash your hands.
Yeah, the things that our parents taught us when we were 5 or 6 to do.
Yeah, So And like I said, I just don't know what to think of it. I'm just happy that my daughter's here because I always have a good time with her. Speaking of Homeland Security, I mean, it's just kind of one of those things where I can have an interesting conversation with her. I mean, how you get kids that are coming through and they're studying something that you don't have a clue what they're talking about. I can have a good conversation with her. So I'm always blessed with that.
Good stuff.
And before we move on to the proper topic, I think this is an amazing opportunity for us as Christians to show what we're made of. And I mentioned that in a video earlier, and I didn't get to watch all of yours, James. But we literally, people are like, well, I like at my church, they're like, I want to form a team. And when there's a tornado, like the Joplin tornado, we're going to go there and cut down trees. Right. Or the next time there's a hurricane, we're going to go down there. And I've got a buddy that's got an amazing company, and they're trying to pull together resources for natural disasters.
Sure.
Human stupidity, unfortunately, I think we might have to include that under natural disasters. But this is actually an amazing time for us to show love to our neighbor. And if it's putting a roll of toilet paper on their front step, and we've called them, we've emailed them, we've hit them up on Facebook and said, hey, Mabel, I know you're in your 80s and you probably can't get out. Can I get you anything? Because I have customers that legitimately don't have any business being out. Right. They're in their late 70s or even in their late 80s and early 90s. And this is one of those moments where instead of maybe grabbing that extra package of toilet paper and throwing it in the garage, or having to park the cars out in the driveway because we filled our garage with toilet paper, it might be a time to kind of put together a care package and love on people in the neighborhood.
You're absolutely right. I had a friend of mine call me today that he's like working at home now. And he said, I've got a lot of spare time because he said, I'm getting finished faster than normal. And he said, do you know anybody that's taking meals to people? And I told him I got a friend of mine who does these pack a backpack for kids at the schools. And since all the schools have closed down, they're trying to get these meals to these kids. And so I connected them together because this guy's got some spare time and said, hey, I'd like to help. So you're absolutely right. It's time for the Christians to really shine out here. I try to keep a positive attitude at all times. I'm in a small networking group, and we met on Zoom, and it was like gloom and doom. And it's a Christian networking group. And I was like, what is going on here? We have a beautiful day. It's gorgeous outside. We're all alive. Let's make sure that we shine, And so, yeah, I agree with you. It is that time. It really is that time.
Yeah.
It's kind of along the lines of what Jim, what you were talking about earlier. I mean, there's so much that we can be doing in the community, but also not even that, but just, take a refresher and training, get your team together with an empty building and practice stuff. Go online, do some curriculum, do some research, do some de-escalation training.
Right.
We have all of this free time available, and read a book.
We may need that de-escalation. We may need this de-escalation training you're talking about the next time we're in the Walmart parking lot.
Well, there you go.
That is the absolute truth.
There you go. So tonight, one of the things I kind of wanted to talk about, and I kind of titled it "Dealing with the Law" because it kind of encompasses a lot of different aspects, whether it's restraining orders or trespassing or that sort of thing. And I know we've talked about it in the past before. I think Jim, you and I have talked about it on other recordings the end of last year. But I always think it's a good subject to kind of circle back around and chat about, because it's something that as the church reaches out to the community, as we get more involved with trying to provide opportunities for the community to come into the church, right, and get rid of baggage and try and help them from a spiritual sense. A lot of times that baggage comes in, and that's just something that we have to kind of learn to embrace, I guess, and deal with accordingly. So that was kind of my thought for revisiting this topic. And certainly with the holidays and when I say holidays, Easter coming up, for the churches that are holding a service at Easter, typically we see more family, more friends come in for Easter visiting. And so, a lot of times that brings in extended family members or people that only, go to church once or twice a year. So from that standpoint, what are some of the things that you can think of, Jim, that kind of stand out to you as far as talking to churches about being prepared for along those lines?
If I can give a little history, because just to
absolutely.
kind of talk about protective orders, court orders. When we first started our safety team at our church, it was because we were raising money for a new piece of property we had. It was a building fund drive. And so when they came to me and asked me if I'd put together a team that would watch the money going from point A to point B, this was kind of like an answered prayer. I didn't know where God was leading me. I didn't know where God wanted me in the church. I wasn't very good in certain children's ministry is not my thing. And so, it was like, oh, thank you, Lord. And of course, I looked at my church and said, hey, I'm a product of when Columbine happened in '99. Our police department was one of the first police departments that started doing active shooter training. So I know all about active shooter training. I said I was in DC, 9/11, and I know all about soft targets, and we're a soft target and all this stuff. And they just looked at me and they said, Jim, we really appreciate your expertise here, but we want to follow the money from point A to point B. We just want to make sure the money's okay. And I was like, hey, fine. Well, a couple of weeks later, we had a guy that showed up on campus that had a court order for supervised visitation with his children. In other words, in the state of Florida, when you have supervised visitation, you have to go to a state of Florida facility before you can see your kids. I mean, This is how bad it is. And so what he was doing, he was waiting till his wife dropped off the children. She went into the worship service and he was going in and getting the kids and taking them out of the children's ministry. Well, of course, when she would come over after church and say, I'm here to pick up the kids, and they would go, well, Charles has them. She, of course, lost her mind. Now, Charles was smart enough and he never left the facility, but he was just showing her how he could go and get these kids.
With the control.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. When she came to us and told us about it, we said we needed the court order, because if there was this court order, we were going to abide by it, because what would happen if not? He goes and gets the kids, there's an incident, and one of them gets hurt. It's going to come back on the church. So it was the first time that we had this type of situation, and we really started to focus on these. Now, let me finish the story out real quick. We had a situation where Charles threatened to beat up his ex-in-laws on the church campus. We stepped in, we stopped him, escorted him off the property. The very next week, Pasco County detective came to the church and said, do y'all know this guy? And we said, yeah, we do. And he said, well, he's number one murder suspect in a murder that happened, in the county. And we said, when did this happen? And they said last weekend, which was the weekend that we had the run-in with him at the church. So after that, the church really started to listen to us, because before this, they were just kind of like, hey, just money, don't worry about things like that. So we've had multiple situations of where husbands will get a protective order, or a court order will be issued against a wife, or vice versa. We have it happen all the time. And so you really have to honor these, and you have to pay attention to these, because let something happen on side the church property, which just happened at a church. I don't remember where it is, but it just happened, where a girl was killed by her ex-husband or boyfriend, and there was a court order out against him, and the church did nothing to stop him from coming on the property. So now the family is suing the church because they didn't do enough to protect her. So it's one of these things we really have to pay attention to. And it seems like they're happening more and more. And, we're fortunate. We're a church that has multiple services on our campus. So we will go to the family in a loving way, and we'll say, hey, listen, we want you to still come here. But the person who has the injunction, had taken out the injunction or the court order, protective order, which church service do you want to come to? And they say the 9 o'clock. And then we look at the other person and say, we have a 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We'd love you to come, but don't come at 9 o'clock.
Sure.
because we still want them in the church. We've had guys that have had injunctions placed against them in our small men's group that are trying and seeking brotherly counsel.
Mm-hmm.
And, Christian invite them in, even though we know what's going on. And we don't look at them and tell them, hey, we'll help you out in court or something like that. No, you got to let it run its course. Pray for them, be there with them, talk to them. But it is one of these things that as a Christian and as a church, it's a balancing act. And we've run into several situations where we've almost had to call the police on people because they just don't want to listen.
Yeah. One of the things you mentioned was actually sitting down with them. And I love that you picked like different services and said, hey, come to this service, go to this service. Right. But one thing that I found, and this is kind of what pushed me to try and research some of Ohio's law and just be more comfortable with it, because I didn't know, every state's different. But I had a family about a year or so ago come up to me at church, and they said, well, we're kind of concerned that, this husband and wife, they're splitting up. We're kind of concerned that the husband's going to come back and try and get the kids out of Sunday school. And so I asked them, I said, okay, what's making that fear? Like, why? Let's talk about this. And they were like, well, I said, did he actually threaten the mom? And they're like, well, and I'm like, no, well, yes or no. Did he make threats or did he not make threats? Where's the fear coming from? And what I learned really quickly was that it made a lot of sense to actually sit down with them away from everything that was going on and say, okay, let's just talk about this. Let's try and put a game plan together. Let's talk about what's been said. And it turned out that they actually didn't have a restraining order. The couple didn't have one. They were separating. But at the same time, they didn't want him coming in and still trying to take the kids. So within the policies and procedures of the church, we were able to kind of work some things out. But that was one of the things that I told them. I said, look, just because you don't like someone doesn't mean that we trespass them or, we keep them from coming to the church. We need the whole story. And in a lot of times, a lot of cases, what you find is there's a lot of emotion built in with responses and that sort of thing. And it kind of made me think about, what was it, Joe Friday that used to say, just the facts, ma'am?
Sure. Well, and that is a difficult problem that you have there, because you want to be fair to everybody and you want to have them there. But really, to tell you the truth, you don't, that's a difficult one, because if there's no paperwork in place, right, it is very difficult. You have to be, that would be one I would not want. I would immediately want to pull the family in at that point in time, and have him maybe at one meeting and her at another and say, listen, this is, we may have to ask you not to come back. You may end up having to trespass both of them, because if it starts to disrupt your church service, because there's no, legal paperwork in here, you're running into a very scary situation, because either one of them could walk in and take those children out at any time. And that for her to come in and say, well, he can't have them, where's your documentation?
And that's honestly, that's what it came down to. And that's what I told her, and they had already separated, but I told her and her parents, I said, if you're going to, they hadn't even made the decision to pursue a legal separation or legal divorce in the courts yet. And so I was like, okay, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's back up and let's look at this. If you're talking about this, as soon as you do it, as soon as you get that piece of paper, and it was a unique situation. They thought that he was involved with drugs and some different things like that. But, they're like, well, we just want to keep him away from the kids. And I'm like, I can respect that,
Yeah.
and the dad was like, well, let me know. And the dad and I have been friends for a long time, but the dad was like, let me know if you ever see him on the property. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's not going to happen because, I don't want to be pulling you off of him, because if I was in that situation, I would be wanting someone to pull me off of him.
Well, and now you're right in the middle of a divorce. You're right in the middle. The whole church is right in the middle because of not, just that's a terrible situation to be in. I like I said, we have had to pull them in. I go back to another one that we had. We had domestic violence where the woman was arrested, the wife was arrested. And so the court had put an order that said, she couldn't be anywhere around him. And the kids were divided. Every other weekend they had them. Mm-hmm. So whatever weekend it was, that was the weekend that person, the husband or the wife, came to church. Well, it seemed to be working okay. And then we found out she was sneaking in the back door of the children's ministry and getting her two kids together and loving on them. And right as the church service would end, she would bolt out the back door. And then the dad would come to get the kids and they don't want to be with him. They throw a fit. And he's like, what just happened here, And then it kind of leaked out to us that this was going on. And we immediately contacted her and said, no, no more. We have all these services. You can come on one of these others or come the weekend that you're supposed to, but don't be showing up here and doing things like that. I mean, I had to grab a hold of him because, he found out about it. Army soldier PTSD. I grabbed a hold of, I literally put my arms around him, just really like a brotherly hug more than anything else, because he was so tense that I thought he might come unglued. And I was like, let us handle this. Please give us a chance. We'll stop this. We won't let this happen again. It's kind of like what you're saying there. You would be upset about it and want to do something about it. He was there at that moment. I was like, he's going to go kill her. He scared me. So we brought her in and said, do it again. We'll contact police.
We're actually dealing with a situation right now with actually a situation very similar to that, with a mom and a grandmother, and the grandmother, has been in court with the mom trying to get the child taken away from the mom erroneously.
Right.
And so, we stepped in and we kind of had to step up security a little bit more because, I think one time the mom was like, oh yeah, I'm here to pick up the child. And of course the person that was kind of, we have a door and we have somebody that guards, literally stands there and checks IDs and stuff like that for the kids area.
Sure.
He recognized her name and knew that she had been at the church before and said, oh, okay. Yeah. And, and so she came in and she had this gift. She had a Christmas present. I think this was about a year ago. And she's like, oh, I'm just dropping off the Christmas present for the girl. And then she left. And, the mom was like, what in the world just happened?
Right.
And, so what we did was we said, okay, from now on, and we ended up trespassing the grandmother because she did not heed our direction several times to say, okay, stop. You don't need to come to the church during the service to access the kids. And it was kind of a little bit, whenever you trespass someone, you always in the back of your mind, you always wonder, okay, is this really the best choice to do?
Yep.
Right. So the officer, who is a friend of mine and a Methodist preacher, actually called to trespass her, and he couldn't hold the phone next to his ear. She was screaming and cussing him out so much that he's like holding the phone like this. And he's like, and that was actually a Columbus officer and another deputy sheriff was there on that conversation. But, he's holding the phone like this and he's like, hey, you're not to come back to church property. And then of course she hung up on him. And I said, well, it's just about, again, it's about exhibiting the control over that situation, because you can't control the person, but you can try to control, the situation to your benefit. But You had a question or a thought, Paul?
Yeah, I'm really enjoying this conversation because you guys have both hit on the dire need for and sometimes the ridiculous drama that has nothing to do with anything that goes with this, because obviously God never intended for divorce. Obviously, it destroys both parties. It destroys the kids. I have been divorced, which was definitely not my idea. I was raised to get married and to stay married. And when people are going through these moments in their lives, they're not rational. I have literally heard lawyers turn to people when I was there and say, I think you need to come up with a reason to get a restraining order. It's going to look better in court if you do. And then the other jilted person is like, I didn't do anything. And you have, there's a church I'm aware of here locally that a guy got a hold of me and said, hey, we've got a problem. We've got a couple that are splitting. They're insisting on both coming at the same time to the same service. And there's some drama that's unfolding. And then the wife is going out and actively recruiting people to her side, and she's trying to push him out. And what is your advice to the husband? I'd find another church. And he's like, my friend's like, what? And I said, I would tell him to find another church right now. They have one service. It's not a big church. She is lying a lot, which I know the situation, lots of garbage drama. Literally all you're doing by going, my advice to my friend for this other guy is you're setting yourself up for a nightmare. She's going to call the cops. She's going to cause an altercation. She literally had him riled enough that he snapped at another guy's wife. And now the other guy is mad at him because he snapped at his wife. And I said, you've got to get out of this. So one, the complete ridiculous drama, all the way over to the very real circumstances with attempted abductions. We've dealt with those. Me having to tell people, well, I just want you to keep an eye out for my ex. He's a non-custodial parent. Okay, then hand me the paperwork that says that, so that I can have it on file. So when an officer pulls up and I've got the guy on the ground, I can hand that to the officer and say, this guy's not allowed to be here. One, he's not allowed to be near his kids. Two, it's wild. And I love the fact that you both talked about that, because it can be ridiculous drama for no reason. And then sometimes people very quietly go, well, we just don't want him to see the children. Why? Well, there's sexual abuse charges and there's a no contact order. Oh my gosh, we need that paperwork.
Right. And you know, with the county that we work with, they're really good that if we contact them and ask them if there's something like this out here, an injunction, a protective order, or stuff like that, they'll immediately look it up for us. And so we kind of have them to help us out with it. But, you know, I tell you, we've run into multiple situations where parents separate, no divorce yet, just separate. And the wife walks in with a new boyfriend dressed to the hilt, like she's getting ready to go out, just to make sure that her ex sees her. That it's like, no, and at this time, there's no court orders, there's no injunctions, there's nothing like that. We have stepped in and said, this doesn't happen here. This does not happen. And here's the reason why. Like, we go back to this, what it could lead to, you don't want on your church property. You don't want to see. This was one of these guys that, once again, lost his mind when he saw this. And it was like, okay, let's take him over to the side and have a long conversation with him. And, you know, we had one of the female ministers go over and say, I want to see you this week. Give me a date and time you can be here. Because if not, we're not going to see you on the property anymore. It was just ridiculous. It was unreal. So, you know, listen, boyfriend, girlfriend, you have to be careful with these things. We all know it. Domestic violence is, anytime an officer goes on, it's the worst in the world. You know, you don't know what you're walking into. You don't know what it's going to happen. Sure. You don't know if they're going to turn on you, both of them. It is the scariest situation. And so when we see it bleed over into our churches, we now I'm fortunate. I have the training, but guys who don't have training, the church, especially your church, they really depend upon you stepping in and saying, this is how we got to handle this. Yeah. And like I said, we try our best. We try our best to bring them into the flock and do it the right way. But it's kind of like, you know, James, what you're talking about. they cuss you out and hang up on the phone and don't want to talk about it. They're not interested in trying to do this or not. That's where it just, disturbs me. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's why for a church that maybe doesn't have a real strong security or safety team in that suit, that's usually where I would say, look, partner, try and de-escalate it before it happens. And that was one of the concerns that I had in the first scenario that I was telling you about, because, again, with the drama, I'm like, okay, wait a second. So if you're going down this road, then let's talk about this, but walking through during a service break isn't the time to be, walking by somebody and saying, look, I have a security concern. See ya. I gotta go in. And I'm like, okay, wait.
Yeah.
Stop. I'm like, let's talk about this and let's put everything out on the table. And I went through a list of questions in my mind, and I said, and I knew these folks, I've known them for quite a few years. And so they were comforted in talking to me, but I said, I'm just going to ask you some very black and white pointed questions about this situation and about their interaction, because I need to know. I need to be able to communicate what's going on with the pastor and say, okay, this is a concern. This is not a concern, and so I went through and asked a variety of questions. Was there an assault? Was there, because she said, her husband, in this case, her husband got mad at her and hit her. And I said, okay, did you feel fear for your life? And she's like, well, no. And I said, okay, but he hit you. Well, he pushed me. Okay. There's a little bit of a, there's a little bit of a difference. Let's sit down and let's actually talk about this. And, let's look at, and so, we went through and we were able to do that, but just sitting down and immediately after that conversation, I reached out to one of the pastors who I had found out had been trying to counsel them. Right. And so I said, hey, I know I'm not asking for the details on this counseling session, but do you have any concerns about them interacting on church property? Because I have a few concerns and they came to me. So here's my list of concerns. My concerns are that, the dad is going to probably try and, and do something because he's a controlling individual, and he had that type of personality that he was very much trying the entire way. Now, her dad, who is a friend of mine, and her mom and myself and several the pastors really spent a lot of time trying to help her get reestablished with their kids. But at the same time, it was just one of those situations. So stepping in ahead of time and trying to address things like that, to me, just always seems like, the best way, and just get it out in the open and try and peel back some of the layers of the drama, and just say, okay, let's just talk about what's really going on here and what really happened versus what you think's happened,
Well, one of the things that we talk about in the training is that this is not gossip.
Mm-hmm.
If you hear something that could be a potential threat for the church, you need to share it with the safety team leaders, because we have leaders and we just have, regular safety team guys. The leaders are the ones that I can trust, that I know that will not go around and spread these stories. So when we had a lady that came to us and she said, hey, my husband and I are going through some rough times. He locked himself in a room and he threatened to kill himself. Okay, did you call the police? Yeah. And she said, well, I did. And then when the police got there, he said, no, she misunderstood me. And that was kind of like it. They left it alone. But I said, does he have the means to do it? That's a big question, like you're talking about. Let's drill down a little bit. And she said, yes, he is a gun collector. And I said, okay, are you in fear of your life? And she says, he's never threatened me. He just got upset one night and said that he was just going to end it all. That's how he kind of said it. here again, James, this is what you're kind of talking about. What
Sure.
does that mean? Does that mean I'm going to end the relationship? Does that mean I'm going to end my life? Does that mean I'm going to end, whatever I've got going on the outside? What is it when you say this? This is why you have to, like you said, peel it back and find out what's going on. Because when we make these statements, it's a top of a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And what is underlying that problem is what we have to take a look at and figure out. And I want to bring up something else. I really appreciate that your church is coming to you and talking to you about it, because I feel like a lot of times the church puts you in charge of a safety ministry. Okay. They put you in charge of it. And then when something like this happens, they don't bring you in. And it's like you find out about it 3 or 4 weeks later after something's happened. And you're going, why didn't I hear about it? Well, oh yeah, you didn't, they were sending messages to each other, threatening to blow each other up, and now I'm hearing about it. So I'm happy to hear that at least they're bringing you in, because that is something that we should stress. And is what I stress, if you're going to have somebody on your campus that you're saying they are in charge of your safety, they need to be advised of when we have these scenarios come up, because they're happening more and more and more. We're seeing this all over the place. Domestic issues. You look at a couple that looks like they're fantastic one week, and the next week you hear, they've just separated, and you're like, how did this happen?
Mm-hmm.
We had a girl that was on stage that was a part of our creative arts team that was, having relationships with several people. And, the husband kind of found out one Sunday afternoon right in the middle of a service. And it was like we had to pull her off the stage, because it took everybody by surprise. But these things do happen.
Well, it's interesting. One of the things you mentioned, I feel very blessed, because there have been a few times over the years when my church leadership has reached out to me and said, we're doing a counseling session with this individual, and this individual he or she has a very hair trigger attitude and response with anger. And from that standpoint, it's like, okay, what is the direction that this is going to go in? And on one particular occasion, a pastor reached out to me. I was out of state. I was down in Tennessee. And one of the pastors reached out to me and said, look, I need to do a counseling session with this couple, and I'm very concerned about the direction it's going to go. Can you just hang around and, be available? And so that was one of those situations where I called one of the guys that helps, with the safety team leadership. And I told him what was going on, and he said, oh, don't worry about it. I'll be there. I've stepped in because I know part of the story. And so he was able to help facilitate it, and nothing happened, and that's great. Nothing exploded or got out of hand. But I think one of the things you kind of touched on that I also really like is that we need to emphasize more of, which was when you said, Jim, to advise people or remind them that we don't gossip. It's not a gossip thing. It has nothing to do with me. And, as leaders, we need to be careful with that information and not accidentally saying it to someone else that doesn't need to know it, or even kind of, I guess, analyzing how much we share with our own team, how much is necessary versus how much isn't, because I think sometimes there's a line there too. But at the same time, and that's one of the things that I said to the family that I was dealing with later. I said, this information stays between us, and and the information, if I communicate with anyone, it's going to be with this pastor, because that, they're the oversight pastor. This is the pastor counseling in this situation. And, I'm concerned. So if I talk to anyone about this, it's going to be this individual, and I'm letting you know. And maybe that's an important thing to remind people of too. When you have that conversation, say, hey, I'm not bound by law not to tell someone if I think that there's an emergency here, right? If I think that there's an issue, or safety or security issue, then, you know, I'm going to talk to the pastors. I'm going to talk to law enforcement. I'm going to talk to who I need to. And it's not a gossiping thing. It has nothing to do with gossip. What it has to do with is ensuring that the other, 1,200 people that attend or 99 people that attend your church are, their safety is considered just as much as, as yours is. So
I go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're go for it.
Okay. There was a couple of things I wanted to bring up real quick. One of the things you said earlier was that, okay, Florida is very, very, it doesn't matter whether it's a push, a shove, a slap, or what. Any kind of violence is violence, okay? And I would recommend that if anybody comes to your pastor or comes to anybody, and in confidence says, yes, he has struck me, they need to encourage them to go to law enforcement. Mm-hmm. You want to make sure that if it comes back, that you were aware that this had taken place, that somebody had told you about this. Amen. You want to make sure that you can articulate that. You told them you need to contact the police. In fact, let me call the police with you right now, and let's make a report. Because if something were to happen later on and you know it, that's just a bad thing for the church. I mean, think about it. Mm-hmm. Church knew about, look what's happened with all these sexual offenses that the church has known about, and it doesn't come out until later on. You see how the church is just, basically destroyed. The second thing I wanted to say is a part of your safety team. You brought up something interesting earlier about a couple that may be separating and there's no paperwork filed or anything like that. I think I would keep them under close surveillance because just like I said, that we had that couple and she showed up with a boyfriend and he could have literally gone off at any moment in time. And so if these things are something that is going on and it's like, oh, we're very mutual, we're very friendly, we're okay about it, all these things like that, until that person brings in that other person, everything is cordial. But once the third person is brought in, you may want to put somebody with, I just saw Paul. You may want to put somebody in the vicinity of that person. I don't know if you've heard my testimony. I don't know if you have. Okay. My parents were separating. They were seeking counsel from a deacon inside the church. My dad didn't like the way it was going.
Oh no.
Sunday night church service. We're all in the church together. Everybody is. My mom and I are on one side. My dad is in the middle, and the deacon with one of his sons. He had 8 kids of his own. One of his sons and one of my brothers were sitting to the other side. When the church service was over, my mom looked at me and said, I don't feel well, I want to leave. And so we left. My dad walked outside in the parking lot and shot and killed the deacon. So nobody approached my dad when this was going on. And he was sitting in the church by himself. So when we know of situations like this, it might be our responsibility to reach them and just sit and be there with them. Job's friends came out and sat with him after the tragedy happened, sat with him for multiple days, did not talk about it. If we just sometimes sit next to that brother, he may open up to us, or we may have that opportunity to open up to them. So when you see these scenarios, it might be wise to have one of your smart guys, not one of your, I don't know if you've got them. I've got hair trigger guys that scare me to death, I would not put the only reason I like them on the team is in case it does go south. I know that they can handle themselves. Yeah. They're the hammer. I'm bringing in the hammer. But other than that, I really don't want them talking to anybody because they'll probably escalate it, not de-escalate it.
Amen.
So, you probably want a brother that can sit there next to this person. And if they see them, they can talk about it. I tell you, this has been something that we've seen so much in our church. I've got other stories. I've got the guy that helped me come back to Christ, the guy that brought me back to the church. He had a divorce, and he one night wanted to go against the pastor. And it was just one of these, because of my training, I spotted it really quick and sat down next to him. And it changed him. I mean, he snapped out of it. He saw me and it was like, I know what you're doing here, and stormed out. He came back later and said, I apologize, because he said, I wanted to get up on stage and do something. So if you don't, this is something that is very important to go through. I love that we're talking about it, because domestic issues, yes, we have our creasters, like you're talking about, those that come for Christmas and Easter. And it's dragging the guy in that doesn't want to come, and he may show up that day and want to cause a scene. And we need to be watching for those and paying attention to those. How many are coming in with smiles on their face, and how many are being dragged in, kicking and screaming because they don't want to be there? And let me just show you how much I don't like it. So yeah, it really is something that we need to be discussing in our groups.
I don't think, honestly, I don't think we've ever had a situation, at least that I've dealt with, where both the husband and wife continued to come to the church during that separation. For us, I think most of the situations that I've dealt with, even the one I was just mentioning, the husband was like, I'm done with church. I'm done with, and so in a sense that kind of made it good. Because we didn't have to, kind of monitor both sides of it, like what you were saying. But at the same time, it still put us on a high alert, because, that individual, that husband knew the church very well. And we knew, he knew the church very well and how it functions. And that, to me, that almost seemed like a bigger alarm bell or bigger red flag. Cause I'm like, okay, I know that you know how to get down to our kids area, even if somebody tries to stop you, because the front and back ways. And sometimes, know areas better than maybe even some of our safety folks do. I don't know. But
to add to that, so you bring up an excellent point, James. You bring up a fantastic point. And this is something that, like I said, these are things that a lot of safety team members don't think about. Here's the other problem that you run into that. He knows your team members.
Yeah.
He knows your organization. If he's been going there for some time, he knows it and what's going to happen. Say, for instance, he goes away for 6 months. During the 6 months time frame, they have a terrible divorce that's going on. You're not even privy to that because she's not telling everybody. And he shows up on campus one day, and your guys are waving at him like, hey, we haven't seen you in a long time.
Yeah.
There may be a problem there. There may be a problem.
Well, and from that standpoint, that's why, and again, we communicate very clearly, very well with our team and say, hey, this is a person of interest, or this is a person that has a situation going on. We need to step in. There was a couple a few years ago that had a similar situation to what you mentioned, about the husband making comments, and then the police came and he changed his statement and that sort of thing. And then the following Sunday they came to church and everything was fine.
Right.
They acted like everything was normal. And one of the pastors in passing mentioned to me and said, look, we're going to start counseling them because, the police were called. He made some comments, that sort of thing. And what's interesting is the first thing that I asked them, I asked the pastor was, okay, so he said he has a firearm. What's going on with that?
Right.
What's he doing with that? Is
Right.
it something where maybe we can store it at somebody else's house until this is done with, so that, it removes it from the situation, and we kind of talk through planning and trying to come up with some ideas to better handle that. So, and you know what, the restitution side of it, they're both of them are, the couple's fine. He's, I think he's had some issues with depression, and I believe, he got some help with the doctor, and they gave him some medication, and I'm not saying that's the cure all for everything, but in his situation, it helped him, and they're heavily back and involved in a great ministry in the church. So I'm just looking through some of the questions that folks posted. Jason Hensley asked a question: shouldn't we be in communication with and be ready to hand off situations to local law enforcement when it gets bigger than something we should be handling?
all the time, all the time. I mean,
Absolutely.
that's one of the things that when we go in and do this training, that safety teams have to be law enforcement. The church, first off, has to be law enforcement friendly. Let's make sure that we're always there. I mean, we need to invite them in. We need to have them, even if they don't, even if they're not working there part-time, if you see them driving through your lot, go out, greet them, bring them in. Yeah. Serve them coffee. Please, no donuts. I'm tired of donut stories. But bring them, bring them in. Show them your layout. I mean, we had 250 kids on a Wednesday night. We had 4 different high schools there. I contacted local law enforcement and said, send me a guy up here so he knows what we're dealing with, because we have a fairly large campus. And at first, the department kind of gave me a hard time. I said, I politely asked for a supervisor. Supervisor called me on the phone. Once he and I started talking, he said, I'll be there in 10 minutes. He showed up. I walked him through and he was like, thank you very much for letting us know about this. Because if you say, hey, I've got a disturbance at the church, you're thinking what? Okay, little ladies fighting over the seat, what,
Sure.
And you get there and there's 250 kids, you got a problem. So like I said, you should be law enforcement friendly. Yes, Jason, you're absolutely right. Get them involved in it. If you think, like I said, if she says to you, he slapped me, you need to make that, somebody needs to call. We had a girl that came in one time. She had a spaghetti strap blouse on, and you could see her chest was bruised. And it looked like to me she'd been involved in an automobile accident where the airbag had hit her in the chest. A friend of mine who was a paramedic came up to me and said, she's been beaten up by her husband. I said, how do you see that? He goes, watch her arms. And when she pointed out, you could see where he had grabbed her and bruised her. And so we immediately sent one of our female ministers over to them to welcome them, never seen them. He immediately became dominant. He put his arm around her. He pulled her in tight. He answered all the questions. He would not. We were trying to get the license tag when they left, but they got out before we could catch it. I mean, they kind of went out a different way. And so it was one of those things of where we were going to contact local law enforcement and say, maybe you do a welfare check on this, because of these bruises. Somebody talk to somebody. It's a great question. Yes, law enforcement should be brought in anytime you suspect any type of domestic violence.
Well, even if you have both the situations, both of the people there and the situation is heated, or you separate them, at that particular point, we're blessed to have several officers that go to the church in a uniformed and ununiformed capacity. And, in the past for us, they've stepped in and they've been able to immediately address because, we're in Columbus and they're in Columbus, and, they're able to do that. But yeah, anytime you even think, I always say, because if it starts off slow and the call comes in as a low priority, they can escalate that call by somebody calling back, but at least you're on their list of, hey, this is a call that we need to address and going on. Paul, you had something?
Yeah, I love what you guys are talking about because it's so pertinent. We used to do like a weekly data dump for our local chief of police, and I invested, it's almost 10 years now, almost the entire time that I did leading of a church safety team, I have done chaplain work with law enforcement. And it can be really hard to get that pump primed because so many officers, they're like, okay, what's your angle? Why are you trying to, and they deal with some of the worst people in society. I mean, I had a chief of police at one point that he was like, I want nothing to do with you. And he was just like, and I'm like, okay, bye. And then the guy that literally succeeded him when I came in, he's like, hey, by the way, I understand the last time you were here, you were told there's the door. We want you here, and any help you can get us is very welcome. And here's our ride along program. And I know you take officers to lunch and whatever, but the investment of time has absolutely been worth it, because I don't know how many times that I've shot a text to an officer that I knew was on duty because I knew them. And there's two things I wanted to say about this is, Forever Vigilant made a great point about the cops like coffee, and also a separate point is they need a place to go to the bathroom. Exactly. They might need, as James has talked about, a place to pull over and do some paperwork. I would tell local law enforcement, and I made sure that the chief knew they had a key to our church. Anything hinky, go check it out. And I would tell them, if you want to sit and do paperwork in the parking lot, anytime somebody suspicious pulls into our parking lot, you follow them on in and get with one of my guys. They'll come get me. We built a relationship and we fed them. And I cannot tell you how many times we would have an amazing spaghetti dinner, and I would send a picture of it to a police officer, and they'd go, wow, did you set me aside one of those dinners? And they would come from neighboring towns, and they would come in, and at first there'd be a hush that would fall in the fellowship hall when we were having a dinner. And you could tell people were like, who are they here for? And then I built a culture around this of people going up and visiting with them, inviting them to sit down and have dinner. When we did that, police officers joined our church. It changed their lives. But also, I would have officers come over and go, that guy is facing felony assault charges right now.
Right.
You can't get that kind of intel without a relationship. And I could let my guys know and say, okay, so what exactly happened? Well, I can't give all the details, but he pepper sprayed a guy and it was based on this. And then I could go give my guys intel. Okay, we would have been in the blind to that.
Sure.
And to your point about building that relationship, and maybe you have some thoughts about that more because you have a background in law enforcement. And James, you've got great thoughts on this because you've done it. It's really hard for churches to prime that pump. So,
well, and when I go and do training anywhere, no matter where it is, I try to get local law enforcement to come in on the training for two reasons. One, we bring up this point, local law enforcement needs to be, you just need to be law enforcement friendly to the nth degree. Paul, when you said the thing about the paperwork, what a lot of people don't realize, in the old days, when we did our paperwork, I'm sounding old here, but in the 70s, when we did our paperwork, we went to the station and did our paperwork because that's where all of our forms were. In today's society, we do our paperwork in the car because it's all online. So we may be sitting in our car for 2 hours doing an accident. I mean, it is possible to be sitting there. So if you don't have a safe place that you can go sit, because you go sit someplace else and people are calling on the phone going, why is that guy sitting there for 2 hours? He should be out, writing traffic tickets or doing something else. So, we tell all the church, every time I go into a church, I tell them, you need to be bringing these guys in. You need to have a day for them. Let's have a first responder day. Why don't we do that? Where we honor them. Let's do something for the families. We just had 2 firemen commit suicide here in Pasco County. Yes, we had funerals at our church. You don't think we're working with this? I mean, we're trying desperately to get these guys in. I have a personal relationship with the sheriff here. When he got baptized, I held his gun for him. I mean, that's just how cool that was.
Praise God.
Yeah. But when we do these things, when we have look, here's the sad thing of our world right now. Here's the sad thing. Law enforcement needs us, and we need law enforcement.
Amen.
And if we don't join together and work together, because when something happens, let's say a shooting, a death of an officer, a death of a family member, law enforcement needs to know that they can come to us immediately and we're there for support for them. So wouldn't it be great if we build that support system right now, instead of walking into the church with your hat in your hand saying, I just lost a loved one? What if we were a part of that team and we already knew this so that we could reach out to you immediately as soon as something like that happened?
Preach it, brother.
Yeah, trust me. Listen, like I said, I am so big on this because I've been on both sides now. I've been on both sides. And Paul, it's kind of funny when you said, this guy didn't even want to talk to you because there's some angle. There's no angle, brother. There's no angle. You forget that. That's almost an insult, I want to say at a point. We are told to love on them. And like I said, if we're not out here helping them, who is? They have their family. And listen, you get into a bad situation at work may cut you out, and you don't even have your friends and brothers there now because you're radioactive and they don't want to talk to you anymore. So who are you going to go talk to? And as Christians, aren't we supposed to be listening to them in a non-judgmental way? Yes. Mm-hmm. They may have done something terrible, but so have all of us. Yeah. So God forgave us and gave us the grace to be able to live the way that we live right now, free. Hallelujah. So why should we be there with them? A good friend of mine, he wasn't law enforcement, but a good friend of mine, he got arrested for domestic violence, going back to the domestic violence. When I first met him, he walked into a small men's group that I facilitate, and he sat down, and after it was over with, I went and talked to him, and he just like, this is nothing. I'm just going to skate through this. I'll just do whatever the courts tell me, and I'm not going to worry about it. They drug him through the dirt. I mean, it was brutal. And when it was all said and done, he was like, if I had not gotten support that I needed from the church and from guys like me and a couple of the other guys, he said, I'd have never made it. And I didn't, he looked at me one time and he said, why is God doing this to me? And I said, God didn't do anything to you. God didn't tell you to live with this woman and not get married. God did not tell you to have a child with this woman out of wedlock. God wasn't there the night that you two got intoxicated and started fighting each other. God wasn't there. So don't blame God, but God has given you support in us that we can be there for you. And in law enforcement, I'm telling you, I cannot tell you how many times I wish I'd have known a church that would have supported me when I was going through some of those bad times. So excellent point. I mean, it's something that is so important. It really is.
We had a couple of years ago, and I'm not sure if I've told this story or not before, but a couple of years ago, we had an officer. It was on Wednesday night. Someone, one of the safety team members, called me and said, "Hey, there's a patrol car out in the parking lot, and it's under, like, we have a drive up kind of vestibule to cover the vehicles and rain and stuff like that." And so I walked out there, and it was one of our local sheriffs, and the deputy had it was so funny because he had one of those styrofoam trays sitting on his lap, right? And he's like shoveling food in, trying to eat quickly, and then trying to type on the computer at the same time. And I walked over to the driver's side of the vehicle, and I said, "Can I help you with something, deputy?" And so immediately, he drops the styrofoam thing in his lap, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I just pulled off the side of the road to eat real quick, and I'm sorry to bother you. I'll move." And I'm like, no. I'm like, wait a second. I said, "You can stay here as long as you want to." I said, "Can I get you a cup of coffee, or can I get you a bottle of water?" And he just looked at me, and his eyes were like this big, and he's like, "No, but thank you." And I said, anytime you need something like that, I said, here's my number. I'm happy to help you out. But anytime you need a place to use the restroom or pull in and eat your dinner uninterrupted, I said, feel free. And, very often we kind of sit in a weird precinct area where we have county, city, and then a township police, and everything kind of oversects in a weird way. Or intersects in a weird way, but he, regularly we have officers that come through, and we always tell them, if you're more than welcome to sit here, and they'll go to the back of the parking lot and kind of sit and do their paperwork or eat dinner or whatever, and they're fine with that. They're happy with an opportunity to be out there, and it's free security for us, right? So why would I complain about that? If there's a police car sitting there by the building, that's better than me going out and buying a police car and used police car and sticking it there. I can't think of a better way to.
I wanted to tell you a funny one, like you were talking about the guy was sitting there eating dinner. We had a guy that came in, one of the officers came in, and when he came in and approached me because he knew who I was, he walked over and it was like he was sweating. And I was like, "Are you all right?" And he goes, "My stomach is killing me and I really need to go." And he said, "But I don't want to go like, in the regular bathroom." And I said, "Come with me. I got one in the back." I said, "Anytime." And see, now female officers now will come to the church because they can go and take all their gear off and go to the bathroom, because we have it's a single room. They can go and take, whatever they need to. But it was just so funny. He came in and he was like, I'm just, my stomach is shot. And I'm just, where, and I said, "Come on." I said, "I got this taken. I've been there before. I know exactly what it's like. And I can't make it to the precinct. Come on, let's go." So, but
see, that relationship is so worth it, because he was comfortable coming to you. And I've literally been with officers who have pulled by the church, and they knew that night, I mean, straight up, they knew that night I was doing maintenance, and I've had them call me and they're like, "Dude, I'm 30 seconds out. I got to make a hard entry on a bathroom. Can you get me through a door?" And because they cleared a call, they were coming back, And you guys know this because you carry duty gear, but they have 26 pounds of gear around their belt. They've got clips these clips that go around on a lot of departments that hold it to you. And to shuck that gear in a hurry is a nightmare. And you learn to pray. You learn to pray as an officer that everything happens the way you need it to. But several times I've had officers that were like, I saw your car there earlier. Are you still there? Okay, I'm coming in hot. Open a door and clear a path.
Yeah.
They're hurting.
I have been there. I've been there. So like I said, to have my friend come and do that, I was like, come on, brother, I got you. I got you taken care of. So, but we have to build these relationships.
Amen.
They need to be, like I said, I did a blog on this. I went to a city. I'm not going to list them, but I went to a city and we advertised and we talked about it. And I contacted their PIO. And I mean, I did the right things. And I said, one of your guys should be at this training, and nobody showed up. Mm-hmm. What bothers me about this is and I mean, we had 100 people there. We had 106 churches there. But yet you allow people to come into your jurisdiction and teach church safety, but you don't know what they're teaching. Mm. And they could be teaching things that are completely against the law that you're in that state. And so when I go into states that I'm not from, I always invite them in. And as I'm going through the presentation, I look at them and say, if I say something that doesn't work in your state, please let me know. Because I'll give you a good example. Tennessee, if you want to be a church safety person or security person, you have to be registered with the state. Okay. Right. So you got to go through some process and all these things like this before you can do that in a church. We have volunteers. They're not going to go through things like that. They're going to go through the training that we provide. So when we go in, I am really big on trying to get our local law enforcement. We do these church safety networking things, and we go into the different counties, and we invite them in because we want them there to see what's going on. You may have a potential problem that your law enforcement doesn't even know. So, we want them there so that they kind of go, oh, really? This happened? Let's make a report. You got a picture of this person? Please let us know, Yeah. So that's one of my big ones. You cut me, I bleed blue. So I'm always going to be saying we got to have law enforcement in there.
Well, and I got to jump in on that and then I'm going to throw it back to James. I have told my wife, as a civilian police chaplain, I've said, if I'm ever going down the road and I look over and somebody's ground pounding one of my brothers in blue, prepare for this vehicle to be unmanned. I said, I'm going to leave you on the shoulder, and she's got a weapon. You stay over here and I'll be back or I won't, but they're not going to fight alone. And one night I actually had a police officer. He called me and he's like, get in my car because it's a small town. There's no backup. It was a very potentially bad situation. And I hopped in and I pulled a guy up to the door and he took my spot. Turned out to be nothing, but I got to be his chaplain and we prayed for safety, which I give God the glory. But he knew that I was armed and I was with him in that particular department. I have a relationship that says, in case of emergency, Paul can be armed. And then another evening I looked out and there's lights going, and I look out and this guy's like my little brother. He actually tried to call me while we've been visiting tonight. And, but he was dealing with 3 guys that were trouble, that were all felons. They were all known to be armed, all known to be dangerous. And I go out there and I'm like, hey brother, are you code 4? He's like, I'm like, what do you need? And so he tells me to guard these guys, and I sweep my jacket back and I'm armed. And the guy behind the wheel he's looking in the side view mirror and he goes, and I cannot describe to you what that relationship did for our church. Our pastor got to the point before he passed away, he was a concealed carry permit holder and he backed up law enforcement multiple times. I had a member of my safety team that did, and I cannot explain to you what that brotherhood meant to our church, because an officer could point to something and say, there's a couple things you need to know about this fellow or whatever.
One of the guys that works with us took me out to the back of his car and says, if I ever go down, here's my key and this is where all the equipment is, and I was like, really? You're going to show me this, And he goes, hey, he says, I might need you to come, bail me out. And so I want you to be prepared. I said, hey, I'm there for you. So, yeah, as I said, in today's world, the churches have really got to be prepared, and law enforcement, we need to be brothers in arms on this. And we need to be witnessing to them, not pile driving it home. Hey, if you were to die today, would you go to, that's not what we need to say. Yeah. It's just that we need to show them that we truly care for them and we're there for them. And anytime they want to just, if it's just to sit and have a cup of coffee and talk about, we just had a friend of mine notified me last night, little girl, 14 years old, passed away, had an asthma attack and died in her bed. And the police were over there. I don't even know how to handle that call anymore. I was when I was working in Bel Air, I had walked into the office and the girl behind the desk said, "Hey, we just had a 2-year-old that fell into a pool over here." And a couple of the officers were over there. And I was driving over because I've got like a 4-year-old here at my house praying, "Lord, please," And I got there and it was one of these things where it was a great story. The 16-year-old sister that was there pulled the girl out, knew CPR and started immediately, and everything was great. But it's just, the two officers that were there needed to be talked to. I needed to be talked to. And the things that we're seeing today, we need to make sure that they know that we're here. That's just all there is to it. Over and over and over again.
Amen.
Over and over again.
For sure.
Sorry, James, I jumped there.
No, you're good. I was just gonna wrap it up. I really appreciate you joining us tonight. I know we went a little bit over, but it's always great having you with us, Jim. So I appreciate hearing your testimony. And I was going to ask you to share that because I know some of the folks, like you shared it personally with me on the phone and stuff, but I know several of the folks that watch and listen have never heard it. So in a sense, that kind of gives you a higher calling and, more of a purpose to do the training and be passionate about it because, it relates to your life and your family and that sort of thing. So, for sure. But let's go ahead and we'll close in prayer. We'll wrap things up and, we'll call it an evening. So I'll go ahead and close it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Gracious Heavenly Father, I thank you for the opportunity that we have to gather together. I just thank you for the broadcast. I thank you for those watching. Thank you that we have the opportunity to minister to others. And Lord, I just ask that you bless the churches that listen and give them a spirit, not a spirit of fear, but a spirit of power to do your will, to work your ministry in their church. And God, I just ask that you would continue to strengthen the churches that are struggling right now with the virus and whatnot. Give them purpose in the community. Help us just to reach out to those around us and be a light for you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Enjoyed it.
All right. So real quick, I'll pull Jim out here for a second. And then just to do a wrap up plug real quick for the website. Jim and Wendy Howard are with Trinity Security Allies. I've posted their website on the screen there, so feel free to visit them. And they've got some great resources. They're our sponsor for the month of March. And then reach out, check out our website, churchsafetyguys.com. We have a YouTube channel. We are on Instagram, Pinterest, all those great fun social media outlets that I don't know if are even really worth our time to be on there, but but we're there. And then if you go to the website and you have an interest in posting your company on there or events or conferences or something like that, please reach out to Paul or I, and we can get you that information. And then if you register, again, we're giving away this book, Countering Mass Shooter Threats by USCCA. And what we're going to try and do every month, we've got some great resources with books and different things like that. We're going to try and actually do a drawing each month moving forward, just to give resources out to folks. But visit us on there, on Facebook. And then last but not least, if you ever have any questions, church related, church safety related, please reach out to us. And thank you, Michael and Michael Holland and Mike Scully for being in the background and helping us with the broadcast. Those guys do an awesome job and spend a lot of time helping with Facebook as well. So, yes, Paul is sending me messages. So we also have an On Killing by Colonel Grossman that he is donating for us to give out. And we've got a couple of good books coming up. So you definitely want to hang out for future broadcasts and whatnot. Other than that, visit our YouTube channel, like and share the video if you think it's something that your team can benefit from, and the channel. And we will talk to you next week. So next week we're going to be talking about different things, different training aspects, different levels of training you can do while we're churchless, buildingless. Let's say buildingless.
The church has left the building.
So, but feel free to join us, and again, reach out to us if we can do anything for you guys. And we love you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. So take care.
Bye.